My name is Stephanie Wood. I am actually on staff here at Daystar. My husband and I started attending here in 2012, and somewhere along the lines, Kip came along and asked me to join staff, and I cried for about 2 weeks because I was terrified to leave my job that I had because I loved it. I worked with United Way in Cullman, and I loved it, and I didn't want to tell my boss. Have you ever done that? You don't want to tell your boss you're leaving somewhere? But anyway, I ended up answering the call, and so I've been on staff since 2015, and I love it, and it's a great opportunity. Good morning to all of our people watching online today with us. I have to tell you, today there is a testament to how wonderful our online campus is because my mom is here. Everybody say, hey, Mama Ray Ray. My mom lives 3 hours away and does not have a church like this near her. It would be probably at least an hour drive to get to a church like Daystar. And so she watches, really attends. We like to say attends because she is a member. And so she attends online every week, her and my stepdad. And so they call this church their home. And they actually came today. I think this is the first time my mom has ever heard me speak on stage because I normally don't tell her. So today she's here, and I'm excited about that. So I want to ask you guys, have any of you ever found yourselves afraid to do something that you knew you needed to do? Yeah. You know you need to, but you don't really want to go do it. I don't get scared about a lot of things. That's not really, doesn't really faze me very much. But there's definitely a few moments where fear comes up, and when I think about things that make me scared, I immediately think about those stinking jumping rocks on the lake. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Indian Head. If you go to Lake Martin, they have Chimney Rock. So you're riding in your boat and you see all these people jumping off the cliff and you think, this looks awesome, let's do that. And you pull up to in your boat, you're just idling out there. You look at the rock, you're like, oh yeah, that's like 10, 15 feet. That's not bad, we're good, let's do that. So you jump out the boat, you start swimming over, you've got to climb up the little mountain to get up there. You hike up the mountain and you get to the top, and if you're old like me, you might bend over for a moment and kind of, okay, that was more than I remember when I was 16. Take a little breath, you get your breath about you, and then you walk up to the edge of the cliff, and you're getting ready to jump, and you make the number one mistake, and you look down. And all of a sudden, that 10 or 15 jump comes to be, I don't know, it feels like 100, doesn't it? Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Am I the only one that gets scared up there? I've learned I'm too old to be jumping off rocks, so don't ask me to do that anymore. I will leave that up to my kids when they're old enough. They are not there yet. But you don't really have an option, you kind of have to jump down. You got to get off of this cliff. You've got to jump down. And so I think about that. That's an easy one that makes me nervous. But this past year, I had another situation that made me really, really nervous, really scared. And I think there might be some people in the room that can relate to this. I have this friend who is, honestly, I tell people all the time, she's one of my favorite people in the world. She is hilarious, okay? And she's very polarizing. You either love her or you hate her, okay? She's that person in the world, and I love her. She is she's a loyal friend. She's generous. For my 27th birthday, she drove up. She lives hours away. We have never lived in the same place since college. She drove up and bought or rented bouncy houses. I was 27 years old, okay? And she rented a bouncy slide and a bounce house because she was like, we're just going to have a fun day. Let's do it. And I'm a summer baby, so we put the water on the slide. Oh my gosh. I recommend that to everyone despite your age. That is not the same as jumping off a cliff. Do it. Rent the bouncy houses. It was so fun. This is pre-kids, So that was a little while back. But it was so fun, and that's just who she is. Celebrate you. She's just a wonderful person. But she doesn't really, she doesn't love Jesus. She doesn't consider herself a Christian. And so that has always been, it's not anything between us. We're still wonderful best friends, but it's always been a difference of, viewpoint in our friendship. And this year she found herself in just a really, really bad situation. And if she looks back on her life, I'm sure she will tell you that was just the worst moment of her life. It was terrible. And I knew that what I needed to do was tell her about Jesus. Now she knows I work for a church. She knows I love Jesus. She was raised in the South. It's not like she's never heard of Jesus. So she knows, but it's not something that she actively decides that she wants that to be something that she follows. And so I knew that I had the opportunity to tell her about Jesus, but y'all, shaking in my boots to tell her about it. I was terrified. I thought, she's going to think I'm weird. We may not be friends anymore. How is this going to affect our friendship? Maybe you have family like that, or a close friend or a coworker where you know what they need, but you're scared to tell them for fear of the repercussions. Well, I'm really excited to tell you that it turns out the Bible is just full of a lot of really scared people doing brave things, right? Makes you feel a lot better when you start reading it and you're like, that person is not a brave warrior going off and conquering the world. No, it's skinny little David who's so small he can't even wear the armor. It's too heavy for him. Little bitty him, able to do things. And other people that are terrified of the repercussions, but they do it anyway. That was so encouraging to me to find out that it's really just a bunch of ordinary people conquering their fears and changing the world. So how many of you in the room know about Queen Esther? Yeah? Okay. A lot of heads, yes. So I don't know why I've just been loving this story this year. I've read it 10 times or something. I just keep loving it. And I love that when you read something, you end up getting something different out of it every time you read it. And so that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about today, but I want to give you a quick run through of Queen Esther's story in case there's anyone that needs a refresher or hasn't heard the story. So when Esther was alive, definitely go read this whole Bible story. I'm going to tell you a lot about it today, but it's so packed full of good stuff. I encourage you to go back and read the full thing. But so we're bouncing all over Esther. So in the beginning of Esther, we've got King Xerxes, and he is the ruler of Persia. And at the time, there is a queen named Vashti. And long story short, the king summons Vashti. He's like hanging out with his guys, doing his thing. And I guess he wants to show off his hot wife. That's kind of what the Bible makes it sound like. And so he calls Queen Vashti, he summons her to come to this dinner, whatever it is, and she refuses him. She denies. She's like, I'm not going to be your trophy wife today, buddy. No. So she doesn't come. And in true, I don't know exactly what year this was, but, in true BC era, she denied him. So he kicked her out and told her she couldn't be queen anymore. So one denial and there she goes. See you later, Vashti. She's exiled. So now King Xerxes is on this hunt, if you will, to find a new queen. And very, very disturbingly, what he does is he rounds up virgins from the communities and brings them to the castle and basically tries them out and chooses a queen based on the one that he's the most pleased with. It's a very disturbing process. I was like, I'm going to throw up reading this. Thank you, Lord, for planting me in 2020, this era, because I would be killed. I got a big mouth and a lot of opinions. It just really wouldn't have gone over well at all. But so Queen Esther at the time, she's not queen yet. Esther is brought to the castle, and the Bible talks about how beautiful she is and, lovely figure and all of these things. And he ultimately chooses her to be queen. So you've got Queen Esther there finally, and then the story turns a little bit, and there's this guy named Haman. Haman comes into the picture, and he rises in command, and he's the best of all the nobles, if you will. He's got the most power, and there's a decree made that everyone has to bow down to Haman. So he's like the vice president, if you will, of Persia, and everyone has to bow down to Haman. Well, Mordecai, who is Esther's cousin, refuses to do this. Over and over, he refuses to do it. Haman finds out he's Jewish, and our poor Jewish friends who just are constantly trying to be killed, Haman decides he's going to get King Xerxes to sign a decree to kill all the Jews. So one guy refuses to bow down, and he's like, kill them all. Let's go. And so there's a decree made that is going to kill all the Jews. So like I mentioned, Mordecai, Esther's cousin, calls Esther and is like, hey, You're the queen. You got to get this under control. Figure this out. We can't all die. Help us. And so he talks to Esther. Esther is terrified. Talk about being in a terrible situation. She knew what she needed to do, but she's terrified because here's the thing. In this time, you actually can't go to the king. You can't just walk in and say, "Hi, king. This is my opinion. I would like to tell it to you and have you do something about it." How's that sound? No, you can't do that. You have to be summoned to him. Well, Esther had not been summoned in months. She was just living in some other part of this ginormous castle, I imagine. And so he had not called her. But the penalty of approaching the king without being summoned was death. Can you imagine if all the people today that speak their opinion, if every time we were like, "Nope, you did. You died. Done with you." Sometimes I think that might be, no, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so if the only way that could be resolved, if you will, is if they approach the king and the king extends their scepter, and then the person was spared their life. So Esther has to get the courage up to basically risk her life to not be killed and go before the king to save her people. Well, she does it. I think most of you that know the story know that. She does it. She goes before the king. She tells him, "Hey, I'm Jewish. If you kill them, you're killing me." And he ultimately changes the decree. If you read the story on its own, it in itself will preach. I mean, if you read about Esther, Esther was actually orphaned. She had no mother and father. She was adopted by Mordecai, her cousin. So she is an orphan, turned sex slave, turned queen, turned savior of her people. I mean, talk about God turning what the enemy meant for evil for good. I mean, he was working in her life. You don't need me to tell you that. You just have to go read your own Bible. It's all there. And it is good stuff, and it is encouraging. And when I was first asked to speak on, we call this Influencers Weekend, not because I'm a cool influencer like Instagram, because I'm not, but we just call it that. But when I was first asked to speak on this, I really thought that's where I was going to go because I've been loving the story of Esther. It's so good. It's so encouraging. It makes you feel like you can conquer the world, that no matter what terrible situation you're in right now, God can use you where you are. And that's true. But when I was rereading the message, I felt like the Lord pointed something else out to me, or more so someone. And that's where I want to go today. Interwoven all throughout Esther's story is Mordecai. I've mentioned him a couple times so far, but interwoven throughout the whole thing, he continues to play this role in her life. In Esther 2:7, that's where it talks about Esther being orphaned. And it talks about Mordecai takes her into his own family and raises her like his own. So he becomes an adoptive father for Esther. But Mordecai was way more than that in this story. He's not just her cousin or her relative. He's a lot more than that. In Esther 3:2, this is the story of Haman and talking about Mordecai refusing to kneel down. And so it says, all the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman. For the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore he told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learned of who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to kill all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. If Haman was here, I would tell him he has a pride issue and he needs to go through freedom. But he's already been dealt with. But if you think that you may think he was in the right, we'll just send you through freedom. But Mordecai was more than just an adoptive father. He was a godly example to Esther. So I was wondering, and I'm reading this, and I thought, why didn't he kneel down? You know, why didn't he? What was the reason for that? And the Bible really doesn't give an exact reason for why he didn't kneel and why he didn't bow down to Haman. But as I researched it, there's two options really that are out there. One, and it does say that he said, I'm a Jew. That was the only really response he gave, was that I'm a Jew. And that can mean two things. One, that he didn't follow the laws of the nation because he was kind of a foreigner, seen as a foreigner. But secondly, and the more popular idea, was that he didn't want to idolize someone who wasn't God. And so I think that is, it seems like a small passage, but if you think about the times and you think about what is the penalty for not bowing down, for not following this decree, that's death. And he was willing to not go against his convictions, even if it meant death. Well, Esther was going to come up against the exact same scenario not too long. And he was a great example to her. He wasn't just, talking the talk. He was walking the walk. He wasn't just encouraging her to do it, to go before the king. He was saying, hey, I'm doing it too, because this is our convictions. The other thing that he was an adoptive father. He was a great example, a godly example to Esther. But one of my favorite things is that he was an accountability partner and an encourager. As you read the story of Esther, one thing that's important to know is that Mordecai cared for Esther. It says that he raised her like his own, meaning he had a father-daughter relationship with her. But also, it talks about how he would stand outside the gate asking daily about Esther. So when they took Esther to the castle or palace or whatever it would have been called back then, he stood there every day to find out about her well-being. The Bible says that. He cared for her so much. But he was also an accountability partner and an encourager. And in Esther 4:12, it says, so let me back up. So when he tells Esther, hey, you've got to go to the king. You've got to talk about this. You got to go before. You're the only one that can speak for us. And Esther says, no, he's going to kill me. I'm not doing that. You're crazy. Mordecai says, do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows, I know y'all know this Bible verse, and who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Mordecai was more than just an encourager. He wasn't just a cheerleader on the sidelines. He was speaking truth into her life. And we need that. It's great to have somebody that tells you how wonderful you are and how your day's going to get better and, just what you want to hear. It's really awesome. I love there's people that just have a gift of complimenting, They'll just come up to you and tell you 5 different things about yourself, and you think, how do I put you on my shoulder and let you walk with me through my day? Because I need that. I need that encouragement. I need that build me up. And that's a gift, and we will take that. But you also need someone who's going to speak truth into your life. When you're scared to do the big thing, you need someone who's there saying, you have to do it because these are the consequences of not. He didn't just tell her what she wanted to hear, but rather he encouraged her to do what God had called her to do. The very best thing that Mordecai was for Esther is he was a prayer partner, and a powerful one at that. In Esther 4:15, when she is ready, she's worked up the courage, okay? Mordecai's convinced her. She's worked up the courage. She's ready to go before the king. She doesn't care the repercussions. She knows she has to do it or the Jews will be killed. When she's done that, she reaches out to Mordecai and she says this, go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, that's the city right outside, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even if it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. At the request of Esther, Mordecai fasted for 3 days for Esther's success. I firmly believe when I'm reading through this story that Esther would have been a totally different story without Mordecai. That's what I feel like the Lord revealed to me when I was reading Esther preparing for this message. Maybe, like Mordecai said, deliverance will arise from somewhere, but you will perish. So he gave God credit, but it may not have been through Esther. It would have been more difficult. It would have been harder. It would have been lonely. But she had Mordecai on her team. Did you know that in the Bible, in Esther, God is not mentioned at all? Interesting fact. When you read that book, God is not mentioned at all. But it's so obvious when you talk about it that he is working behind the scenes, that he is sewing this story together so perfectly. But every player in the story had a part. The Bible is absolutely full of mentor and mentee relationships, but we don't have that in our culture. It's really unique to have a mentor in our culture. You might have a work mentor, someone you look up to in your career, but I only know a handful of people who have a spiritual mentor or are a spiritual mentor to someone else. And I think that's really sad, to be honest, because we've gotten in a place where we think we can do everything by ourselves. Are we not the most independent culture? I mean, to be honest, this is a huge fault of mine. I know it. My mother knows it. I hate when somebody tells me unsolicited advice. Like, please do not come at me with your unsolicited advice. Am I the only one? You know, like my older sister would come and tell me stuff, and I would just be like, okay. Like, I got this. I'll figure it out. I'm independent. I can do this on my own. I don't need your help. But then I'm also over here not, crying per se, but sad and lonely and wondering, why do I have to walk through this hard season by myself? And, who's there to encourage me or tell me how to move forward? So it's really a catch-22. We shut ourselves off from having that mentor relationship, but then we're also upset that we're doing it all by ourselves and wishing we had the wisdom and the guidance from elders or people that are more spiritually mature than us. So as we go into 2022, I want to ask you a question. Who is your Mordecai? And who are you Mordecai to? I think it's time to be done doing things all by ourselves and pull in the people that God has given us around us to make us have success. So I want you to make some New Year's resolutions with me. I've got 3 for you. Now, I have heard through the grapevine that people don't stick to their New Year's resolutions, but we're all going to stick to it in here, okay? We're going to write them down, hang them up, and do them. So the first thing I want you to do this year is I want you to find a mentor. Mentors are so valuable. I'm so thankful for the people that I have that I can go to and ask questions and, try to figure out. I mean, I use them in not just spiritual, hey, read this weird Bible story today. What's this mean? Like, that's nice to have someone that's further along in their journey and you can kind of ask weird questions. I mean, my husband he gets in the Bible so deep, like way deeper than I do. And he will bring these stories out and ask me these questions. And I'll just look at him blank face like, I don't know. And the Old Testament's kind of weird, like there's some weird stuff happening in the Old Testament. And he'll ask me about it, and I'm like, call Matt? Like, I don't know. But it's so good to have those people that we can lean on and ask those questions. But I've used them for not church things. I've used them for friendships. I mean, one of my closest friends got married on my due date. And y'all, I was ticked. I was so mad. I was like, what? You could have picked any date and you left me out of your wedding? I mean, I was so upset. And I asked my mentor, I'm like, do I have a right to be upset? Because I'm mad, real mad. And y'all, she looked at me dead in the eye and she said, absolutely not. Because this day is not about you. She looked at me just like that. She's like, this day is not about you. This is about them. And I was like, okay. But I needed somebody to speak truth into my life. Not somebody who's going to tell me what I want to hear, like, oh, girl, I'd be so upset. That's so wrong. We got plenty of those people in our life. Plenty of people who tell us what we want to hear all day long and are scared to death to tell us the truth. You need somebody who is willing to tell you the truth. It's important. And if you don't know where to find a mentor, join a small group. Maybe you join the first one and those aren't your people. Join 6. There's no rule that says you can only join one. Join as many as you want until you find someone that you can connect with. All right, New Year's resolution number 2. Pour into others. Pastor Jerry always says we are meant to be a river, not a dam. It is not fair. It is not fair, and it's not meant to be for you to just store up all of that wisdom that the Lord is giving to you and not pour it into someone else. You're meant to share that. When the Lord drops something in your heart and you learn something new, don't feel weird to tell a friend. Don't feel weird to please post it on social media. Gosh, there's plenty of negative stuff on there. Tell me something good. I'll be looking for it. I'd be excited to read that. Share. Be a river. But throwing words out is good. But I wasn't even planning to say this, but I'm immediately taken to the Bible verse of scattering seed, Some falls on the rocks, some falls in the vines, and some falls on good soil. When you're just throwing stuff out there, you may fall on good soil. Maybe. But when you are intentionally pouring into an individual, you're going to definitely fall on good soil. So find someone to pour into. And I'm going to tell you a way to do that at Daystar. Join the dream team. I'm going to be real honest with you. Pastor Jerry might smack my hand. But we need dream teamers. This church doesn't function without volunteers. We literally can't exist without you. And so if you need a way to pour into somebody, join the dream team. We will take you. And it's an opportunity for you to continue to make more connections and to find intentional relationships. Last thing, number 3. Do something brave. Do something brave. We may not save an entire nation of people. I'm not in a position right now. I am not in a political position to go save an entire nation of people. But that does not mean that we can't affect real life change into somebody. There's somebody in your life that you can change their life. Chris Hopper always gives me credit with saving his life at Indian Head. And I really don't even know the story very well, but he'll always be like, you saved my life. I think I threw him a life jacket while he was in the water. But it's it's a moment that I get to carry forever and that he carries forever, and that's a connection. We may not really save people's lives, but we can change their life. And we can introduce them to Jesus, who absolutely will save their life. When my friend was walking through the darkest moment of her life, and it was just this terrible valley, and it was just horrible, I knew that I needed to share Jesus. But I didn't just jump right into the opportunity and start word vomiting. I did two things. I prayed, and I asked that God would use me. This is what I always said. I did the same prayer before I walked up here. I asked that God would use me, that I would just be a vessel of his honor and just his words. So if you don't like what I said, it's not my fault. Sorry. And then I did another thing. I texted my mentors. And they already knew about this person. I've talked about her for years to them, and I've asked for their advice and different things. How can I speak about Jesus to her? And so they've known, and when I told them, I said, y'all, it's here. The moment is here. I can tell her about Jesus. The opportunity is perfect. It's it. This is it. I asked them to pray with me, and I know without a doubt that they did. And so I did something brave. And I talked to my friend about Jesus. And I'll be completely honest with you. I wish I could stand here and say, you know, she's going to be in heaven. I know without a doubt she'll be in heaven. I don't know that yet. I don't know that she has fully committed her life to the Lord yet. But you know what she did do? When she was walking through one of the darkest moments of her life, she sat in a closet and listened to Hillsong worship music. The peace and comfort of God was present in her darkest moment. And she got through that. And so I get to celebrate that I did something brave. And that God honored it and showed up for her. You know, the benefit of having someone in your life like Mordecai is that you go through the hard things together, but you also are rewarded together. The very end of Esther's story is my favorite, because in this huge turn of events, King Xerxes actually kills Haman, the one who was trying to kill all the Jews. He kills Haman and then he was like a very prestigious member of nobility. So he had lots of land and money and all the things. Guess where all that went when he died? To Mordecai and Esther. They didn't ask for that. They just wanted to live. They just wanted to survive. But God's righteous vengeance is better than anything that we could mastermind. He always goes above and beyond for his people.